All right, so today we're going to talk about the cell cycle and mitosis. So how do cells make copies of themselves for growth and reproduction? So how do starfish and geckos regenerate their missing limbs? And why can't a human do that? We're not that advanced?
I don't know. They have regenerative like cells, helps them for limbs back when we don't.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about why that's possible for them and why it's not possible for us. You will understand once we get through the cell cycle and mitosis today. Okay?
Because we're bigger.
We're bigger?
Yeah.
Keep that. And see what you think when we're done here. What about how do your cuts heal? Okay. They scab up. Okay. Yep, so you cut yourself, you bleed, eventually it'll form a scab, right? And then what happens after that? Red blood cells create more cells, okay? How do plants grow? Okay. Okay. So what do plants need to be able to grow?
Sunlight.
Nutrients, okay? They need sunlight and water and what do they use?
CO2.
Yep, CO2, carbon dioxide, right, very good. And we're going to talk about that when we get into cellular energy next week. All right. So the cell cycle is the series of 4 events that cells go through as they grow and divide, okay? So there's what is known as the G1 phase, the S phase, the G2 phase, and the M phase, okay? And we're going to talk about each of these individually. So the G1 phase is known as the GAP1 phase. So this is where cells grow in size and they make new proteins and organelles. Next is the S phase, and this is the most important. You need to know this, okay? And we're going to get into a little more depth with this when we actually get into DNA. But the S phase is known as the synthesis phase. So this is where DNA replication happens. What does it mean to replicate? To make a copy. And we're going to get into DNA replication once we get into DNA itself. Okay? That'll be 2 units from now. So this is super, super important. DNA needs to replicate before it goes through mitosis. Okay, the next phase is the G2 phase, which is known as the GAP2 phase. This is where the cell prepares itself for mitosis, for cell division. Okay, so centrioles and spindle fibers are formed during this phase. Next is the M phase, and this is the mitotic phase. So this is where mitosis actually occurs. This is where cell division happens. Okay, so there are 2 parts, mitosis, which is made up of 4 phases, and there is what is known as cytokinesis. And cytokinesis, the best way to remember this, cytokinesis is where the cytoplasm is splitting, where the cytoplasm is dividing. So cytokinesis, cytoplasm. And who remembers what the cytoplasm is, because we've already talked about this. You got it, okay? So the cell membrane also divides in this process, okay? So G1, S, G2, okay, those are the first 3 phases of the cell cycle, and this is known as interphase. So interphase is where the cell spends most of its time. But note, remember I said that the S phase is the most important because what happens there? It is synthesis, but what happens there? DNA replicates, okay? And if you look at these three phases up here, which one's the longest? The S phase, okay? Synthesis. So super, super important. The S phase is part of interphase, and it is super important because that is where DNA replicates. So why does a cell have to go through interphase before it divides? What we just talked about. Huh? Well, it does prepare, but what did I say is super important? The DNA replicates, okay? So if we're talking about cell division and a cell is going to divide to make more cells, what do all the cells have? DNA, okay? So we talked about that when we talked about types of cells, okay? So DNA appears in various forms at different stages of the cell cycle. So during interphase, it is in a loose form that is called chromatin. So think of a bunch of jumbled up spaghetti noodles, if you will. And then during the S phase, DNA is replicated. You're going to hear this a lot, okay? And each copy of DNA is held together by this right here, which is known as a centromere. So each copy of the DNA is called a sister chromatid. And then when we put those chromatids together, we make what is known as a chromosome. Okay? So the best way to remember these, chromatin, and I might jot this somewhere. Is in a non-dividing cell. Tin, non-dividing. Everybody following me? A chromatid, what do you think? After what I just put up there, what do you think a chromatid is going to be found in? A what? A dividing cell. Okay, so chromatin versus chromatid. So the chromatin is the loose, and then the chromatid is once DNA is replicated. These are sister chromatids, and together they make a chromosome. And a chromosome, you're going to see this tightly coiled DNA. And in both cases, they are attached, the chromatids are attached by a centromere. So the chromosomes you are going to find in mitosis. Chromatin will be found in interphase. Because in interphase is the cell dividing net. Huh? Is the cell dividing in interphase? No. Okay? So that's where it is, and it's not dividing. But once the cell starts dividing, that is when you're going to see your chromosome and your sister chromosome. Okay? Question so far? So what does DNA look like during interphase? DNA. What does it look like? Interphase. It's what?
One.
1. So like, it looks like jumbled up spaghetti noodles because it's loose, okay? Then, what about mitosis? What are you going to see?
2.
And what is it called? What kind of chromatids? Chromatid. Y'all got this. Look at the science. What? They're a chromosome, but they are essentially sister chromatids, but it is a chromosome, okay? So they are going to look like this. So it looks like a coiled X that's held together by, what did we say this was? So the best way to remember this, looking up here, it's not quite there, but where are you finding that? In the what? In the center. So it's called a
The center near
centromere. Close enough, I'll take it, okay? So centromere, so think centromere. So that's what holds the sister chromatids together to make the chromosome, okay? During which stage of the cell cycle does DNA replication occur? The S phase of interphase, okay? The S phase of interphase. What is interphase? Okay, which are G1, S, and G2. What's G stand for? Gap. Good. Okay, so G1, S, and G2. So gap 1, the synthesis phase, and gap 2. What stage does this cell spend most of its time in? Yes, but specifically interphase, okay? But the S phase of interphase is the longest of the 3, okay? What 2 steps occur during the M phase? Mitosis and what? Cytokinesis. Yep, cytokinesis, okay? So mitosis and cytokinesis. All right. So now we're going to actually talk about mitosis. So mitosis is when a cell divides itself 1 time to produce 2 identical daughter cells. So some things we need to know about mitosis. We talked about 2 types of reproduction way back at the beginning of the asexual and sexual. So we said the cell divides itself 1 time and it produces identical daughter cells. Sexual or asexual? Asexual. Okay, so we need to know that mitosis is asexual reproduction. How many parents? 1 parent. How many cells does it make? 2 cells, and we're going to get into all this. And what do they look like compared to the parent? They're identical. Because if there's only 1 parent, they can only look like the 1 parent, right? Okay. All right. So there are 4 phases of mitosis. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So before mitosis happens, the cell goes through interphase. And the reason it goes through interphase is because DNA has to replicate, okay? So that is our G1, S, and G2. Next is prophase. And some key pieces that we need to know about prophase. DNA condenses into chromosomes. So you're going to see chromosomes start to form. And the nuclear envelope starts to break down or disappear. Okay? So the nuclear envelope is what we find on the outside of the nucleus, and it works very similar to the cell membrane. So what does the cell membrane do? It allows certain things to enter and exit through. So the nuclear envelope, also known as the nuclear membrane, does the same thing, but it's doing that for the nucleus. Okay? So it does what? Allows things to enter and exit. And it's going to enter and exit through what are known as nuclear pores. Okay? So DNA condenses into chromosomes and the nuclear envelope breaks down. Next is metaphase. The best way to remember this, and this is probably the easiest of the 4 phases, the chromosomes line up or meet in the middle. So metaphase, meet in the middle. Y'all got me? We got triple M's going on. Metaphase, meet in the middle. Okay? So the chromosomes line up across the center of the cell, and spindle fibers attach to the chromosomes. Those are these red things that you see up here. So what do you think of when you hear the word fiber? Fiber, what did you say? A wall. All right, y'all are going in the opposite direction of where I want to go. I didn't disagree with you, I just said you went in the wrong direction.
Clothing fibers.
What?
Clothing fibers.
Clothing fibers, is that what you said? Yes, that's where I'm going, thank you. Okay. All right, so clothing fibers. So you think of like a string, right? Okay, so these spindle fibers are what attach to the chromosomes. This is important because in the next phase, those spindle fibers, what do you see happening? But what here, they connected here, and these are the chromosomes, so what do you see happening here? They're breaking apart, they're pulling apart, okay? So in anaphase, the sister chromatids from the chromosome are pulled to opposite sides of the cell. Okay, so they're meeting in the middle here, and then in anaphase, they pull to opposite sides of the cell. So that's why it's important to know that the chromosome is made up of sister chromatids, because the chromatids are what are being pulled apart. Okay? And then the last phase is telophase. Okay? So this is when chromosomes begin to loosen, and the nuclear envelope starts to reform. So what does this kind of look like? What other phase? Look on the board. Interphase, okay? So telophase starts to look a lot like interphase. But now you are going to end up with 2 new cells. So in telophase, the chromosomes begin to loosen and the nuclear envelopes reform. So you see that the cell is starting to split, it's starting to divide. Everybody sees that? Then in cytokinesis, what did we say happens? Cytokinesis. Think back to cell organelles. Yes. Cytokinesis, so what word are you? What? What? Cytoplasm. So in cytokinesis, the cytoplasm is what is splitting and the cell membrane. Okay? Cytoplasm and cell membrane. So that's when we actually see 2 new identical daughter cells. You got it? We all good? Okay, so interphase. What's the most important part? The S phase, because DNA is replicating. Okay, and then in prophase, that's when the nuclear envelope starts to dissolve or break down, disappear, and chromosomes begin to form, become visible. Metaphase, they come together, they meet in the middle, metaphase, meet, middle, meet, middle. Y'all follow my, okay. And then anaphase, they're gonna do what? They're gonna go to opposite ends, they're gonna pull apart. And in telophase, you're gonna see the cells starting to divide. Okay, so the nuclear envelope is reforming. Chromosomes begin to loosen, because now when it starts all over again, back at interphase, we have what? Chromatin, which is non-dividing and loose, right? Because then it's going to start over again, and those 2 cells are going to now become, and those 4 cells are going to become, and 8 become, and 16. All right, we'll stop there. Okay? Okay, so the cells continue dividing. So the best way to remember the phases of mitosis is PMAP. That's the best way to remember in order. Pro, meta, ana, telo. PMAP. Got it? All right, so after mitosis is through, cytokinesis occurs, and that's what I said splits the cell membrane and the cytoplasm. So now, instead of the cell starting to split in telophase, you now have 2 new identical daughter cells. Because we started with how many parents? 1. Uno. Okay, so one of the last things about mitosis, we've already did this on the board. So it is a form of asexual reproduction. 1 parent, identical cells, because there's only 1 parent. So we end up with 2 daughter cells. And these daughter cells are known as diploid, which is 2N, because it is the full amount of chromosomes. So let me explain this, because you're going to see this. We're going to talk about it later when we get to meiosis. Diploid is the full set. So if, now I'm making all this up, this is not real. If we've got a cell and it has 101 chromosomes. I don't even know where I pulled that. Go with me. How many chromosomes is each daughter cell going to have? Huh? 101. Each daughter cell. Why? And it's exact replica of the parent cell. 1 parent, identical offspring. So if the parent cell has 101, each daughter cell is going to have 101. Y'all with me? That is the diploid number. The full set of chromosomes. Y'all following me? So you are going to see, and I'm going to go over this now, one of your activities over the next few days, you're going to see a drag and drop on diploid and haploid numbers. So diploid is the full set. So if you hear me say haploid, what do you think that's going to be? Half. Perfect. So if, I got to put the lead-in number now. If the parent cell has 100 chromosomes, what's the haploid number? 50. Okay? Everybody following? So diploid full, haploid, cut it in half. Okay? So when we get to meiosis, we're going to talk about haploid. But you're going to need to know the difference now. Everybody got me? Okay. So the purpose of mitosis is to allow organisms to grow and repair cells. And this is also where diploid comes into play. This happens in somatic cells. Somatic cells are body cells. So all the cells in our body, we get more of those via mitosis, with the exception of the gametes, which are what? Anybody know what gametes are? Did anybody do their vocab? Eggs and what do y'all have? Sperm. Eggs and sperm. Gametes. So those are the sex cells. Okay? So sex cells, meiosis, somatic/body cells, mitosis. Okay? So sex cells, gametes, that happens via sexual reproduction, which we'll get to when we get into meiosis. Mitosis is our body cells. Okay? Anybody have questions on that? It's a lot, sorry. No good. All right. So how many cells does mitosis make? 2. How do the daughter cells compare to the parent? Identical. And what if we were to draw a picture representing the process, what would we have? What's the first one? What happens before mitosis? Interphase, then we'd have, then what? Metaphase? And then last is, I heard it, after telophase. Yeah, after telophase, what happens? What's the last thing? C. Cytokinesis. Okay, cytokinesis. All right, during which stage of mitosis does the nuclear membrane reform and the cell prepares for division? Telophase. During which stage of the cell cycle do the cytoplasm and cell membranes split? Cytokinesis. What are the 4 stages of mitosis in order? Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. PMAP. Perfect. Okay, what happens before mitosis? Interphase. What makes up interphase? G1, S phase, G2. Which stage of the cell cycle is depicted? And if it depicts mitosis, I want you to tell me what number it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. You ready? It's interphase, so there is no number because why? It's the start. It happens before mitosis. Okay? I like it. 0. 3, which is anaphase. Nicely done. 2, metaphase. Perfect. Nicely done. 1, prophase. Nice job, y'all.
5,
Cytokinesis. We don't have to give that a number because even though it's the end. So interphase at the beginning, cytokinesis at the end. Okay? That's when we actually get 2 daughter cells. So telophase is the starting to split.
So each cell that they produce daughter cell, wouldn't that make a parent cell? What if?
Did you hear that?
No, what do you say?
If the cells reproduce and make daughter cells, would that make the cell a mother cell?
He's being silly.
It's the words. They just use a play on terms when they talk about mitosis. Like when they say daughter cells, it's essentially to represent the sibling of the original. It's never meant to be brother, sister,
Right.
cousin.
I thought you were really just trying to be silly.
I mean, I really wish they
Yeah.
used a different term.
Yeah. These are just the words that they came up with. That's what they use.
And it's been like that forever.
But, you know, I thought you were just using it. You like it. All right, so, end of the day, mitosis is cell division. It is asexual reproduction, so that means there's only one parent. It goes through one division. We get two cells. They are identical. The cells are diploid, which means they have the full number of chromosomes, and their purpose is for growth and repair of the body cells, which are known as what kind of cells? You gotta know this word too. S. S-O. Somatic. That's right. Make sure you know that body cells are somatic cells. And then when we get into meiosis, we'll talk about gametes, which are the sex cells. Not different. But when we talk about meiosis, we're going to talk about mutations. For an organism? You mean? I mean, yes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what one. But yeah, all the organisms, especially when you'll see some numbers, they're made up numbers, but when we get into meiosis 2, we're going to do it again. You need to know the difference between diploid and haploid, but I just made that up. But it's I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. Snake skin.
Snake skin. They can reproduce sexually.
Oh, I got you. I thought you said snake skin. All right. Last little piece is cancer. We're gonna watch a what?
Gross.
Gross?
Yeah.
What's gross?
Cancer.
I don't disagree with you. We're gonna watch just a short video. Where's the? Is it not working up there?
I don't usually use it because it's never loud enough. Let's see where we at. Volume. See if it It's like maybe the internal, external speakers are off or something. Be so loud.
Did we have to turn on? So what did you see happen? Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about the difference between a normal cell and a cancer cell. But cancer is obviously not very fun. Cancer hits home for me. I have my brother, thankfully he's still here, but my brother had cancer and battled it for a few years. He had colon cancer, and when he was diagnosed, he was stage 3 already and 36 years old. So he had to go through chemo, and he had to have part of his colon removed. Thankfully, he doesn't have a colostomy bag. Does anybody know what that is? You do? Does anybody else know what a colostomy bag is? No? Yes? No? So, if you have, depending on how much of your colon is removed or whatever, people have to have colostomy bags, and that's how they go to the bathroom. Okay, so they have a bag, and then it obviously doesn't look anything like, not trying to be nasty, but like we go to the bathroom, right? Because it doesn't go through the whole process that it would go through for us. So some people have to live with a colostomy bag. Do you know somebody? Is that how you know it? Huh? You just know who they are. I know people with them, but my brother was very fortunate. And then I had an aunt who actually died from cancer, and I've had several relatives battle all different types of cancer, and it's super, super scary. So, anybody else? Okay. Okay. You did? You got treated? Did they remove it? Yeah. So it wasn't.
That's because I was stupid.
Okay. So was it just basal cell? So skin cancer is scary too. I've actually had skin cancer myself. What? Your grandma had skin cancer? So like melanoma, skin cancer. So that can spread, right? So I had I was fortunate that it was just basal cell, so they were able to remove it, but, and typically they say that it doesn't come back, but melanoma is not good. So you probably had a form of basal cell. You have a big old circle? I got a nice scar about that big. They had to put 17 stitches in that big. Really? From before they removed it? Before they removed it. What did you? Gross? Gross. Yeah. It's nasty too because they make sure that they get it all. So a lot of times they take more than they need to take. So. Yeah. It's crazy. Thinking about it. And I was awake for that too. I was like, what in the world? And they just numb you so you could feel the pressure of like the knife blade and the stitches with the needle, but it doesn't hurt, it just feels real weird.
And then they did it, so they did it again, and I was like, don't do it. So I did it right there. They wouldn't grab the bone.
Ouch, man, that hurt, right?
Well, it didn't hurt when they did it, but then the lady started squeezing it, so the bone was like pressing up against the nerve and stuff, so I was like, ow.
Were you awake for yours?
Yeah, and it did not tickle. It's still like, I just went back yesterday, they found 2 more spots, and it doesn't tickle. I mean, this spot right here where they cut 5 times, and it still hurt, like, to press on it, it hurts. But the stuff they had yesterday, they froze, so I can start to feel it, start to bump up, kind of get like a bump, and it'll peel and come off. So I'll have to go back in 4 weeks and see where I stand there. But yeah, cancer's not fun.
No. My aunt died of cervical cancer, and she battled that for a really, really, really long time, and it obviously did not end well. And then I had a cousin who actually had leukemia, so they had to like wash her entire immune system, and she lived in a bubble for a while because you don't have an immune system. What happens?
My girls.
She was. Yeah. Yeah, my cousin was young when she was diagnosed and went through chemo, radiation, all kinds of stuff, and she still has issues with it now, but, yep, kind of had to live in a bubble for a short period of time, and not short, actually, not super long, but a decent amount of time, and, what? I know we do live in bubbles now.
See, the thing about skin cancer that y'all need to, at your age right now, that you need to be aware of. I worked on a commercial fishing boat. I started when I was, 13 years old? So all of that I'm developing now is from them. And so it's like, now I wear a white bird hat, I put sunscreen on all the time, and I protect myself. But all of that I have had removed has been due to when I was your age. So I guess what I'm trying to say is my advice to you is, I know we all do it, take off our shirt, take off our hat, go out, swimming pool, beach is probably the big one. Cover up, man. It's not worth it, because you get our age, and all of a sudden it starts developing, and you get paranoid like you're doing something wrong, and it turns out you have no control over it because it started when you were 14, 15, 16, 17. It just took this long to finally show. So my suggestion, advice would be cover up, do the best you can, especially the tops of your ears. That's probably this oncologist and dermatologist that I go see. He said your tops of your ears is the worst place on your entire body, along with your scalp. He said because usually your ears you never cover up. He said you sometimes people put people losing their hair like myself, they'll cover up with sunscreen, but they'll forget their ears. And he says that's usually the one place that it's like this. So.
Well, yeah, us gals, if we have our hair down, we don't put anything in here. Or this one back here. All right. So last thing, normal cells versus cancer cells. So normal cells reproduce themselves exactly. Cancer cells don't stop reproducing. So it's uncontrolled cell growth. That's the big piece you need to take away from cancer. Okay. Normal cells stop reproducing at the right time. Cancer cells don't obey signals from other cells. They just keep, as you saw in the video, they keep growing and growing. Normal cells stick together in the right place. Cancer cells don't stick together. And that's why cancer can spread, and it can spread quickly. Normal cells self-destruct if they're damaged. And cancer cells don't specialize, but they stay immature. Okay, whereas normal cells become specialized or mature, and that takes us back. Remember, we talked about stem cells and how stem cells can become what? Any type of cell. So that means once they differentiate, they have what? If they differentiate, they have a job. They have a job. Okay? So cancer cells don't specialize. And you saw how rapidly they reproduce. Okay?